All right, everyone, welcome, welcome. It is exactly 9 o'clock. And if you're here, then you are joining us for a short session on an overview of social and emotional learning. This is going to be quick. We've only got like 30 minutes, and I want to give you some time at the end for transition. So we're going to be pretty fast today. If you have questions, please pop them in the chat. I'll answer them as I can. But generally, I'm just going to go. If anything comes up for you afterwards, feel free to join me at my office hours at the end of the day today. Well, not end of the day. It's right after lunch. So from 1 to 2, I think. Check your schedule to be sure. But I have office hours later today. So feel free to pop in then, and we can have a discussion about SEL there, answer questions, whatever you'd like. So we're going to jump into a brief introduction to social and emotional learning. My name is Molly Keys. I am a behavior support specialist, and I am joined today by the incomparable Anna Kay, one of my colleagues on the behavior support team. She's going to be running tech today, so she'll be periodically popping the slide deck into the chat if you'd like that, and other resources. Well, not other resources. There aren't any other resources. It's just a slide deck. Anyway. So I am a behavior support specialist. I'm also an instructor at UNM and CNM. I'm a research nerd and an educator, first and foremost, really. I've taught in grades 1st all the way up through 8th grade. So this is something that I've always sought to bring into my classrooms. So brief overview of what we're going to cover during this time. We're going to start by looking at the definition of what social and emotional learning is. It's a phrase that we hear a lot, and you will hear a lot this year. It's kind of the new buzz phrase in education, but we need to make it more than just a buzz phrase. This is something that needs to have a lasting impact on our students and our profession. And so it's part of understanding what SEL is how we bring that into something that's lasting and permanent in our profession. Then we're going to talk about something called CASEL. I often also say CASEL. Just know that if I slip and say CASEL, it's the same thing as CASEL. We'll talk about what that organization is before we talk about the 5 components of social and emotional learning. I'll touch on some brief research that demonstrates some of the benefits of social and emotional learning before I dive into a few more. And then finally, just leave us with a quick message on the vital importance of SEL during this time. So first, what exactly is social and emotional learning? Well, when you hear that phrase, a lot of the time, educators and people outside of the education field think touchy-feely things because of the word emotion. Emotion is in there. It's touchy-feely. It's all about our feelings. It's all about hippy-dippy stuff. It's all about talking about how we feel and circling up. And those are absolutely components of it. However, SEL is a lot more. It is something that is embedded into what we do every day, and it's embedded into the success of our students in our classroom in every way. So not only is it learning to recognize and manage our emotions, but it's also how we set positive goals. It's how we show empathy. It's how we establish positive relationships. It's how we make good decisions. It's how we work with a team. It's how we study and organize ourselves. These are all aspects and facets of social and emotional learning. So if you're sitting there thinking, which you might be, and I don't blame you, and if you hear your peers saying this, I don't blame them. SEL isn't part of what I do. I've spoken to a lot of secondary teachers, especially who say, SEL is not my job, I teach science, or SEL is not my job, I teach social studies. Well, SEL is a part of being an educator in so many ways, because if we want our students to work well in teams and groups, SEL is how we do it. If we want our students to remember to do their homework when they go home at night, SEL is how we do it. If we want our students to learn how to study and organize themselves, SEL is how we do it. If we want our students to set goals for achievement, for their future, for even their next test, SEL is how we do it. So no matter what you're trying to get your students to do in your classroom, no matter how you want them to succeed, social and emotional learning has a pathway for that, and it has a component for that. So it's important to remember that social and emotional learning, while it does have those emotional components, it's much more complex, and it includes many more aspects of what makes us successful individuals. As a matter of fact, according to CASEL, the organization that created our competencies for social and emotional learning, those people with SEL skills after they graduate college and high school tend to be hired more frequently than those without. Big companies and corporations look for people with these skills. They want people that can do these things over people that just have skills in that content area. And it's because SEL skills allow you to problem solve, work with others well, and build positive relationships within a team so that you can be more successful in that career. So not only is it important for us now and in ensuring our student success, but it's helpful for them throughout their careers, their lives, and their futures. So it's important for us to consider how we can blend this into our teaching, both explicitly in direct instruction, and also how to blend it into our curriculum that we teach. So who is CASEL? CASEL. Who is CASEL? Well, they're the Collaborative for Academic and Social and Emotional Learning. This is a non-for-profit organization that was founded in the 90s that collaborates around the goal for creating high-quality research and practices in social and emotional learning. They want to build resources and tools for educators and policymakers so that they can begin bringing social and emotional learning into classrooms with more intention. Because I think you'll find that as we go through these, there are things here that you're familiar with, things that you've experienced as a student, things that those of you who have classroom experience will be able to look at and say, oh, I've done that. I do that all the time. The goal of CASEL, though, is to bring those in with intentionality and purpose. So some of what they do is they study and perform research and fund research as well, so that they can build on the competencies they have and really promote this work in education. But they also provide work for schools and districts and resources so that we can help to build these skills into classrooms more effectively from our level. And then they also have built the competencies that we adopt in APS. And these are the competencies and skills that most school districts around the nation have adopted for their social and emotional learning as well, because they're research-based, they're backed in a great deal of literature, and they're straightforward, most of all. So let's dive into those competencies then. There's 5 of them. Very straightforward, 5 groups of competencies. First one being self-awareness, then self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Each of these has within it a set of ideas and things that students should be able to do if they have these skills. Now, there's a lot of complexity here, of course, as well. There's some overlap between them. You'll see there's relationships between each of these. And because of that, that's what helps to build a really competent individual in the field and area of social and emotional skills. So let's dive in first to that self-awareness piece. Now, in terms of our relationship with understanding SEL, self-awareness and self-management are the 2 that teachers tend to think of the most when they consider what social and emotional learning is. These are the ones that have some of those more emotional components. This includes identifying your own emotions and understanding yourself, having an accurate perception of your own strengths and weaknesses. A lot of metacognition goes into self-awareness. But this is also being able to have confidence in yourself, being able to try and try again. And it's also a sense of self-efficacy, that feeling that I can do this, I can be effective. Here's when I'm effective. So in this realm of self-awareness, this is when we are building awareness of ourselves and helping students to build awareness of those emotions and thoughts that they have, and being able to recognize how those thoughts and emotions influence behavior. This is a really cool area, especially for our young students, to begin with at that very beginning of the school year, early on, when those kindergartners, first graders, second graders come into school. They don't necessarily have a great awareness of themselves, a great awareness of their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. This is also something that you'll find many students who are neurologically divergent, such as students with ADHD, they struggle with this. It's hard to recognize your own feelings as a child and a young adult. Self-awareness helps us to build competency in that area. This is also sort of where that idea of growth mindset lives. More and more in the education field, we've been working towards the idea of building a growth mindset in our students, moving from I can't to I can't yet. That idea that I will be able to do something with time, growth, and effort. And that's where self-awareness comes into play. If we want to build that growth mindset, then self-awareness is a key tool for that. So that ability, again, to know my emotions, understand where they're coming from, understand how those impact my behavior, know my strengths, know who I am as a person, have some self-confidence, and know when and how I'm an effective person and when I can perform. So then to build off of that, once we have that idea of who I am, what I feel, and how that influences my behavior, then we can also consider the idea of self-management. Self-management is the ability to control those things. So controlling impulses, controlling stress, having some sense of self-discipline, that intrinsic motivation, having an idea of how I can set goals for my future, both long-term and short-term, and how I can organize myself. Again, these are skills that as you enter into the classroom and gain more experience with students, you'll find more and more that these are areas where every single one of our students have struggles. And you'll hear a lot of talk in the classroom, in the school, and your school around, oh, well, he just can't manage his impulses, or they have no idea how to organize themselves. I had to dump out this desk 3 times last week because that kid doesn't know how to organize themselves. These are skills that as educators we can teach, both explicitly through direct instruction of here's how you can organize yourself, and also by embedding it into our daily instruction. For example, we're doing a social studies lesson. I will teach how I want my students to organize their notes at the end of that lesson. At the end of this lesson, we're all going to get out our purple social studies folder and put this in the first pocket on the left. Once it's in there, we will make sure that our old notes are behind it and that our assignment is on the right-hand side. Now I've just taught some organizational skills. So in this realm, this is where we are, again, building off of those recognizing emotions and being aware of ourselves so that we can think about our behaviors and begin to change them. So if you have students that struggle with behavior, this is a realm that a lot of direct instruction will need to take place. This ability to manage our stressors. So now that we've learned to recognize those emotions of stress, now we can move to managing those things. That ability to know my impulses and now control those impulses. And using all of this self-control to begin really motivating myself so that I have the drive to succeed. Not coming from outside influences. It's not coming from that idea that, ooh, maybe if I complete this, I'll get a prize. We're beginning to help our students to build that inward motivation so that they have that drive to succeed themselves. Self-management is a very important area of social and emotional learning. And again, it goes back to that feelings and emotions piece, but I think that it's easy to see now some of those seeds for academic success built into these areas as well. Because without that impulse control, without that stress management, without self-motivation and goal setting, academic success is very difficult to achieve. So once we have a good sense of ourselves and a good sense of how we can manage ourselves, we can also begin building on that social awareness piece. Social awareness is our 3rd competency in our 5. And this is a piece where we are beginning to turn our attention to others. We are beginning to recognize the emotions of others. We're working on taking their perspectives and building empathy for them. We're also at the same time learning about diversity, learning about the many cultural groups and ethnic and social norms that live around us. We're beginning to build community around those things so that we can really support one another and build respect for one another. Respect is one of those words that's thrown around a lot in schools, and I can tell you that most kids don't actually know what it means. They know the word pretty well, like, oh, that was disrespectful, you need to respect me. Respect, respect, respect. But many students don't really have an innate sense of what that word actually means and what it entails for their behavior. Social awareness helps us to build capacity for really understanding that term respect in its various contexts. Because respect for a teacher looks different than respect to a peer. Respect to your principal looks different than respect to your mother. And so beginning to build this idea of contextualized social awareness through this competency helps our students to build better relationships moving forward. So not only are we looking at that diverse aspect and that empathy building, but we're using that to better understand one another's behavior so that we can build respect and community for one another. And that's kind of a beautiful thing. That's something that we all want in our classrooms, is that idea of having a community among us so that we can lean on one another, build learning and have a great time with one another. In order to do that, social awareness is something that we need to build capacity for. And that's what this competency is all about. And that, of course, carries us into those relationship skills. You'll notice that there's that overlap is building, that growth is building here with these competencies. And that's part of the beauty of it, is that they do relate to one another. So in relationship skills, this is how we are working on understanding how we build and maintain healthy relationships and what those look like as well. How do we build relationships with one another that are healthy, respectful, loving, and effective and rewarding for all of the members of that relationship? This is how we also learn to communicate clearly. I say that as I mumble my words. This is how we learn to communicate clearly with one another. This is how we cooperate. And also at the same time, how we understand peer pressure, social pressure, and learn to avoid it or resist it. We are also learning to begin that negotiation of conflict here. As we all know, conflict occurs in classrooms. You don't have to be a teacher to know that. Conflict will occur over the silliest and weirdest things that you never thought possible. I had two girls fighting once because one of them painted her nails one day. It confounded me that that was even a thing. But it happens. And relationship skills allows our students to negotiate those conflicts themselves so that we aren't pulled in to handle them and negotiate them constantly ourselves. This is also how our students seek out and offer help to one another. So in this realm of relationship building and relationship skills, they're learning that teamwork aspect. What can I offer to someone else? What can I ask for from someone else? This is something that many of our students need help with, because those of us, again, that have any experience with children will know that many students need help understanding when they need help, what help looks like, and how they can help one another. Oftentimes, we'll find that students who are struggling in this area will, instead of helping, they'll tell what to do, or they will boss, or they will manage someone else. Instead, we can teach them through this competency what help looks like, feels like, and sounds like. And that's something that's beneficial in any academic area. And then that idea of teamwork is so influential in any classroom. We are going to have our students work in groups. It's going to happen, and it needs to happen, because as Lev Vygotsky says, learning is social. Learning does not happen in the absence of social communication. And so because of that, we know that students will talk and will need to talk and will need to work together. This competency builds capacity for teamwork so that students can manage their groups themselves, cooperate effectively, and we will be pulled into those things less frequently. Less managing on our part, more self-management on their part. And then we have the idea of responsible decision-making. Now, this one is huge for our classrooms. And this is one when I speak to science teachers who tell me that they don't have time for or can't make space for social and emotional learning, I pull out my sheet on responsible decision-making. Because if you look at that list right there, that is essentially the scientific process, with the exception of ethical responsibility, but scientists always consider ethical responsibility in their work. They consider the influences on their work and what that might be from a bias perspective. They consider the implications of their work from an ethical perspective. This is a scientific perspective. And it's also innately embedded in any field that we might teach. We want our students to identify, analyze, solve, evaluate, and reflect in any classroom, from kindergarten through college. And responsible decision-making is kind of the culmination of all of the skills that we've taught in all of the other areas that allow our students now to have that capacity to reflect on their thinking because they have self-awareness, to evaluate their thinking in depth because they have self-management, to be able to identify, analyze, and solve because of all of those other competencies. And then that ethical responsibility piece is one that builds in to help our students be ethical, responsible students in the classroom so that they understand why plagiarism is wrong and is not helpful for their academic career, so that they understand why this work that they do is important for them, so that they're not cheating and not looking for answers from someone else. So this is a huge piece in all of our classrooms, and one that helps us to build an entire community around solving problems and making responsible decisions, whether that's on the playground when students are deciding whether or not they should jump off the swings, or in a high school chemistry classroom when they're deciding whether or not they should spill their chemicals down the sink. No matter the context, the skills in responsible decision-making help our students to succeed in that area. So a quick word on research. These are just 3 research papers that I pulled to kind of illustrate some of the reasons why we care about SEL in the classroom. The first is that every state has expectations for SEL instruction, but we don't really have a lot of that in teacher prep programs, if any at all. And it's something that SEL, and because of that, SEL instructional needs in the classroom aren't being met. And you'll see that in student behavior, in teacher happiness, in a lot of areas. You'll see the implications of that. So the research says it's not happening. And this is part of why now in APS and school districts around the nation, we are pushing this buzzword of SEL, 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 and you'll hear it all year long. We're pushing it now because we know that we've fallen short in the past. An important thing to note is that SEL is something very important because it makes long-term money sense. In terms of not even money, it's important for our economic outcomes for all of our students. Students with better SEL skills have higher economic mobility. They're better able to earn more money over the course of their lifetime. It improves their physical and mental health. It also improves their likelihood of avoiding jail time overall. Students with these skills tend to succeed in life more frequently, to whatever standards that may mean for them, and to avoid pitfalls. Meta-analysis of research has also demonstrated that it leads to overall better academic outcomes. Students with SEL skills tend to do better than those without. Students tend to have improved behavior. They tend to be happier in school, and a lot of other things. So overall benefits, though, as well: lower levels of stress and distress for students, and more importantly for teachers. Teachers who have a lot of SEL in their classrooms are less stressed, their students have better grades, communities are stronger, everyone is happier. There's also more opportunities to teach because you're pulled away less frequently for small issues, for interruptions, for behaviors. You have more time to teach if you have a high focus on SEL. So that means that if you focus a lot on explicit SEL instruction, you're not missing out on any content. If anything, you're gaining more time for content because you did SEL time. And that goes for secondary as well as elementary classrooms. This is proven in both areas. So a high school ELA teacher focusing time on SEL will end up being able to cover more of her curriculum than a teacher that doesn't. It's a very interesting phenomenon. And of course, in this time of COVID / post-COVID / re-COVID, we don't know what's happening, everything's up in the air. SEL is a vital and urgent tool for us. Our students are coming back with a sense of loss. There's a lot of economic strife, a lot of fear, a lot of loss of control, and a lot of trauma in general. SEL is how we can help them to process that trauma while remaining in the academic setting. So this is a vital tool in any grade level for our students to succeed. There's a references slide. I'll let you guys check that out on the PDF. And so I can let you go a little bit early. Thank you for listening to me talk at you for that time period. I really appreciate it. And if you have questions, please, 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 please come to my office hours. I would love to chat you up there. I'd love to hear from you and see what you feel about these things. So if you'd like to email us, our team is bss@aps.edu. All of our team members are there, except for our new friend, Angela Pacheco, who is joining us this fall. And you can also follow us on Twitter at APS Team. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you at office hours. Adios. Fastest 30 minutes in the world. Thanks for running tech.